Hi guys, my name is Emily, and today I'm reviewing and discussing Divergent by Veronica Roth. Of course, there are no shortages of reviews on this book on the internet, but I am studying this book for my thesis, and so I thought I would share some of the things that I'm thinking, just in general, as I read this book, because I was reading it not for fun this time. When I first read this book, I really enjoyed the dystopian setting. I liked the idea of different factions, and how society kind of functions by assigning different roles to differently inclined people. And so you would end up working in a place in society where your personality best fits. I really like that idea. The first time I read this, I really liked Tris. Up until she met Four, I thought Four kind of brought her down, but reading it this time, my feelings have slightly changed. I was very much reading to pick apart Tris and her interactions. What I've discovered this time is while I really liked Tris as a character, I think I like her more this time than I did the first time. I really don't like her relationship with Four. Four, for me, comes off very creepy. He is 2 years older than her. He's in a position of authority. He knows she's from a faction that doesn't do touching, and yet he spends a lot of time touching her. We don't hear mention that as a Dauntless leader, he's very hands-on with the other initiates, but he's very hands-on with Tris. I feel like their relationship needs to be questioned a little bit. Here's a girl who has never really lived on her own or done anything without her parents or her family for feedback. She wasn't allowed to ask questions ever, and the first time in the real world she meets a boy who shows interest in her, special attention I would say, and I wonder if it's just not the most healthy relationship, because he could definitely take advantage of her vulnerability as a person who has never been in a relationship and has never been allowed to express herself before. We learn later on that she fears intimacy. It's one of her fears in the simulation things. She's afraid, but she pushes herself to embrace this fear and to be with Four, and the whole time I was reading, the whole Four thing just creeped me out a lot. He looks at her a lot, there's very much a male gaze turned upon Tris, and it dissects her and it cuts her into little pieces, and it made me uncomfortable. And of course this is first-person narration, so Tris is recounting to us her feelings and how she sees things, and so she is seeing that Four kind of dissects her with his eyes, and I found that really disturbing. When I read Insurgent for the first time, I definitely didn't like their relationship because I didn't like what it did to Tris. I feel like this time I read it, I'm definitely gonna be watching that relationship more. The first time I read Divergent, I did think the relationship between Four and Tris was cute, but this time I really didn't like it. It made me very uncomfortable to read. If young people are reading this, we're handing them another piece of literature in which someone their age gets in a relationship with an older person who's in a position of power over them. One of the popular books I'm thinking of where that happens is Pretty Little Liars with Arya. And if you watch the television show, they do a little bit to interrogate that relationships between adults and young people are not okay with Hannah and someone's fiance, someone old, and they do kind of address the fact that relationships between adults and children are not appropriate, but they never really do that with Ezra and Arya. Divergent is providing us with another example in which we have a young person entering into a relationship with a person of authority who is older than her, and even though it's a 2-year age gap, and I guess at 16 they're kind of entering adulthood because they're making these choices for themselves, I would say that there definitely is a power imbalance between Tris and Four, and I think we maybe need to question and look critically at their relationship, because it's very easy to get caught up in the descriptions of like the cool tingly feelings when he touches her. The second thing that bothered me reading this a second time around is the sexual assault. Tris is sexually assaulted when the group of Dauntless initiates attack her at night, and I think it's Peter that touches her breasts. That's assault, and they don't report it. Once again, this is one of those teaching moments. I feel like young adult literature provides us with a talking point with young people. As a person who works with young people, when the Divergent movie came out, we were talking about it. It was an opportunity to talk with my youth about the sexual assault scene, and of course we talked about how in the movie they'd cut it out, how in the book it was there, but why would they choose to cut it out in the film? Like, that was an important moment for Tris. And it is an important moment for Tris, and it's an important talking moment between people who read this book, and the fact that it's not really addressed in the book. They take an example of sexual assault. They don't call it sexual assault, which it is. Tris doesn't want to report it, and Four doesn't push it, even though he's in a position of authority and he has the power to do so, and have the person punished for their inappropriate actions. If you're reading these books as an adult, you can use these moments as a talking point with other young people who are reading them. It's interesting. It's interesting to hear what young people have to say about these things. I worry about the effects that young adult literature can have on people, because literature does have effects on people. I truly believe that what you would read has an effect on you. And if you've been physically or sexually assaulted, and your favorite character doesn't report it because she wants to be strong, she wants to be brave, she doesn't want to have these people turn around and attack her, what kind of example does that set? I think it would have been braver and more courageous for Triss to have reported the sexual assault and have Peter punished. And it would have been better for readers, I think. As a person who read as a young person, who looked for examples on how to deal with situations from older and wiser people, because I didn't like to share a lot of my feelings with adults, I looked to books. As an adult now, I like to critically think about what we offer young people in terms of resources on how to respond to situations, because I feel like books sometimes offer responses on how to deal with a situation. I want to know how you guys feel about that. How do you think that young adult literature can work? Do you feel like young adult literature works? Do you feel like young people are even picking up on this stuff? Sometimes I feel like maybe I overthink things, but I think that's the job of an English major, kind of. I'm curious what you guys have to say. If you've read Divergent, I enjoyed Divergent when I read it for fun, and I was unsettled when I read it critically. Those are my thoughts. I definitely would like to discuss in the comments. How do you read? How do you think reading affects the real world? Does it affect the real world? Is it an escape space? I maybe should have planned specifically where I wanted to go with this. There's a reason I picked this for my thesis. Neither of those things I would be addressing in my thesis, but those are just kind of loose thoughts I have, and I thought I'd share them with you guys. I guess what I'm really asking, what I'm really trying to get down to, is an author responsible for providing a good example to their audience when they're writing? That's something I struggle with, because a story is a story and the author has a story in mind, and certain events happen and play out in specific ways, the way the author wants it to. But if you're writing for young people, does an author have a responsibility to provide young people with appropriate interactions, or to at least somehow have the character turn a critical eye on something inappropriate, have the character come to some sort of critical revelation, like in the Pretty Little Liars show? Like, so that's something I really appreciated about Pretty Little Liars, was that all along you have this inappropriate relationship between Arya and her teacher that no one seems to care about. There are no consequences for that relationship. But then the show provides a second example of an inappropriate relationship between an adult and a young person, and they give a very clear response on how, if you are touched by an adult and you feel it's inappropriate, you should go with those feelings. It's not appropriate to have that kind of interaction, and that adult can't make you feel bad for that. There are problems with the relationship between Ezra and Arya still, but I appreciate that the show made an effort to kind of turn and look critically with the characters, so that young people with the characters can explore how you might react to an inappropriate relationship. What are we responsible for? What are authors and publishers responsible for? Should they be responsible in providing young people with some sort of critical engagement with things that are inappropriate? Go ahead, include inappropriate age gaps, inappropriate power balances, assaults, but then I feel like you need to turn around and critically engage with what you have presented. And I'm not sure if Divergent does that. But what do you guys think? Do you think that texts need to do that? Or do you think that's our job as readers to then kind of turn around and interrogate these moments and talk about these moments in communal spaces online, or with our friends, or in classrooms if we're studying this book? I'm very curious to see what kind of response all of my kind of rambly questions will get. I look forward to discussions in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!